Right before House and Senate session each Tuesday, we meet with a group of General Assembly members in a segment we call Capitol Spotlight. We take 5 minutes and talk to members of the House and Senate about things they're working on and how it might impact you, the Rhode Island citizen. My name is Dave Barber, and I'm joined by a good friend of ours. We've interviewed him many times, the Honorable State Representative Larry Valencia. Representative, it's good to see you.
Good to see you, Dave. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Well, I'll tell you what, you have an interesting piece of legislation that you're working on that is being considered today by the House Judiciary Committee that deals with the whole voter ID thing here in Rhode Island. You'd like to make a minor change to that current legislation. The majority of the voter ID bill will stay intact. Can you give us an overview?
Sure. I mean, as you know, I introduced a total repeal of voter ID earlier in the year because I just feel that it's an infringement on an American right, and it's a barrier to voting that we don't need. But was not able to get any progress with that particular bill as written. So what we've done is we've now modified it in such a way to freeze voter ID where it is. So there'll still be 7 different types of photo identification that you can use, but you can still be able to use your birth certificate, your social security card, or a government-issued medical ID. And those are without photo. So that will help some of the elderly population, some of the homeless population that might not have the resources and the time to get a photo ID.
I read that 11% of our voting age population does not have an ID. I'm told that that's somewhere in the neighborhood of 21 million people in the United States of America that for one reason or another do not hold on to an ID of any type. Now, to you and I, that may seem strange,
right,
but to a lot of folks, it's not so strange.
It's not. I mean, there's an elderly population that has either stopped driving or never drove to begin with, so there's no need for them to have a driver's license with a photo. There's a tremendous percentage of the population that doesn't have insurance, so they don't have a need to go to a doctor's office or produce ID for any other purpose, or let's say go to a pharmacy and do that type of thing. So it's clearly a little bit above and beyond what's necessary. This bill in its current configuration, we had this in place in 2012. It's going to allow us now for at least a few cycles to look and collect data and see if there's actual voter fraud taking place, because that's the reason why this bill was created, was to defeat a problem that didn't really exist. And I just want to get as much data as I can. Is there really voter fraud in this state? And right now, so the answer is no.
Well, let me just give you a quote from an Elizabeth Ginn. She is with the Council of the Brennan Center for Justice at NYU School of Law. This is a woman pretty bright. She said, quote, "The number of prosecutions for voter fraud are virtually non-existent," close quote. Now, she's with NYU, the Brennan Center for Justice. If voter fraud is so rampant, as many people want us to believe, why isn't anyone being prosecuted for it?
Because there is no prosecutions taking place, because there really isn't a lot of voter fraud taking place. If you look back to the Bush administration, they examined hundreds of millions of votes over that 8-year period that they were in office. They were looking for voter fraud. They found no evidence. They found it was less than a dozen cases of voter fraud. Because voter fraud, actually walking into a voting place and forging someone else's signature and passing yourself off as someone else in front of a room that's filled with potentially 6 to 12 neighbors is a very difficult thing to do.
Do you really believe, Representative, that this is just a way to really promote voter suppression, that this isn't about fraud at all?
Absolutely. It is a form of voter suppression, and it harkens back to the day when there were poll taxes and literacy taxes and things like that. They were trying to keep the voting population down. And right now, when we only have 50 to 60% of the people that are taking part in the process, we need to do everything we can to reduce those barriers. And so even though this is a partial victory, I'll still be pushing for a rollback, if not a repeal, of voter ID in the future.
Do you think you have the votes this time around?
I hope so. I'm hopeful that my colleagues will look long and hard at this and realize that this is just a small step in the right direction.
Representative Valencia, thank you so much for taking time out of what is a very, very busy day. You're on the House Finance Committee. It keeps you really hopping. You're very busy. And again, we're getting into the final days of session. Thank you so much for talking to us.
Thanks for having me, Dave. I appreciate it.
I'd like to leave you this particular day with a quote. And the quote is, "The right to vote is the basic right by which all others without it are meaningless. That quote is from Lyndon Baines Johnson on the day that he signed the Voters' Rights Act of 1965. For Capitol Television, I'm Dave Barber.